thanks to the organizers and everyone here. I will try to address some of the dark holes of European policy. If you want to know more about Free Press Unlimited's projects, etc., I encourage you to go to the website. We initiated projects like Radio Samane or Iran. We also created Radio Debanga, which is an extremely successful, very old school media, shortwave radio, 6 million listeners on a weekly basis in Darfur. So I think we know a little bit about it. But I think it is important to focus on what can Europe do, what is Europe doing, and try to formulate some recommendations. First of all, some observations. In the last year, more than 40 countries, some of them European, have established legislation to restrict internet access. We are seeing a 10 to 15 year curve, negative curve, of press freedom worldwide. And one of the most sad aspects of this is the total lack of reporter safety. These are 3 points that I think need to be observed and digested by everyone before jumping ahead to formulate project proposals. We're not doing well, and we're, to a certain extent, rowing against the tide. And maybe an additional observation, it was said in the first panel, actually, when it comes to media, the free market is not a solution to deliver a multi-voice, pluralist media landscape, as you can see clearly in countries like Turkey, Egypt, let alone speak about Syria and other places. So it's just to mark the urgency of the debate. Let me try to formulate a couple of principles. First of all, I think that, as my colleague from Iran was saying, if you want to deliver values, then one of the most important things is that you need legitimacy, credibility, and trust. Legitimacy, credibility, and trust is not dispensed easily by local populations. And just for the sake of argument, I would say that no matter how good the intentions of international extraterrestrial broadcasters are, they are not often a legitimate actor in the discussion about freedom and democracy and the development of democratic values in society, as they are seen as an outside voice. And that has something to do with legitimacy, credibility, and trust. We need local actors, because local actors from inside change societies, and unfortunately it is not diasporic communities. Notwithstanding the great efforts that people are doing from the outside, and not disputing any of their intentions. Change comes from inside, not from outside. Another principle that I would like to formulate, which is very relevant to the EU at the moment, because I think the EU also has to make up its mind, that's the more important issue of the balance between security and freedoms. And I would like to reiterate Frank LaRue's, the former UN rapporteur for freedom of expression, observation that there is no balance between security and freedom. If we jeopardize freedoms and democratic values for the sake of security, we've lost the battle already. It's a hard discussion because, as I said, internet legislation is restrictive in the last years. It's no longer a place and a platform where freedoms are delivered. It's a place that excels in persecution methods, and it's losing rapidly its meaningfulness. And so a reinvigoration of the digital agenda of the EU would be extremely important, especially to know disconnect strategy. I'd also like to say a few words which are not mine, so please go ahead and accuse me of imperialism. I'm happy to. It's the words of Marwan Mouasher, Jordanian former minister, who tried to leverage Access to Information Act in Jordan. In a conference last week, he said, there is a big problem when you leverage democratic values in the Arab world. It lacks a culture of pluralism. So what is a culture of pluralism? It's very difficult to define, but it is definitely not giving the access to the floor of those who yell the most hard. And so pluralism goes about creating a debate platform where people have access and are not sidelined because of extremist or fragmentation or marginalization efforts. That is a very big problem because, as I said, it's not something that you can leverage from the outside. You have to create this culture of pluralism inside. And it goes back to a lot of things that were said about religious minorities, etc. Are we doing enough in that area? So I think that those are a couple of principles, and then I would say that 90%, unfortunately, of politicians think that leveraging democratic values is about sending messages. Well, this doesn't work. You can send as many messages as much as you want. Leveraging values is about providing intimate debate, security for those who take part in the debate. It's about true dialogue. And it's not about someone saying something to someone else. And I just witnessed an extreme example of that when former BBC presenter Tim Sebastian gave a keynote speech telling all the Arab reporters of the Arab Reporters for Investigative Journalism that they should not be fearful to challenge authorities. And someone in the audience, 320 Arab journalists, asked Tim Sebastian, have you ever been threatened in your life? And he said, no, not really. So what is the legitimacy of a Westerner saying to Arab journalists, don't feel threatened, you have to challenge authorities? So discussions are complicated. Now let me try to formulate a couple of recommendations. And I'm sorry if this is kind of a scattered panorama that I'm creating. First of all, I think it would be very interesting to look at an EU internal leverage mechanism that leverages democracy as a key indicator for its support. What do I mean? We have an internal EU mechanism that says that if your balance sheet as a government is not in order, you get punished by the EU. We have no punishment inside the EU for democratic values. So what is the legitimacy of the EU going to the Arab world and saying, and raise their fingers about democracy there, if we allow countries like Hungary to make a joke of press freedom and jeopardize pluralism inside the EU? We need a leverage mechanism inside the EU to leverage democratic values and hold each other to account, because it will create a better legitimacy for the EU when it's speaking about democratic values. Same is true a little bit about the European family, because I think for external observers, it's very difficult to really understand the formation and the diversity of European institutions. But I'm sure that many people will feel that the Council of Europe, currently being headed by Azerbaijan, which is going on a rampage against journalists, is an outcry. And the EU, simply for the reason that the Council of Europe shares this very important word, Europe, with the European Union, should talk about it and end this catastrophe. That's about legitimacy. That is about credibility. That is about trust. So the EU should get its own house in order. That's recommendation one. Second, I think that we need a reinvigoration and reinvestment in the digital agenda from the European side. We're seeing with the change of current leadership in the EU and the change of the DGs, etc., we need to bring people around the table, because there is no coherent approach at the moment, and some of the other speakers have talked about that. there's sometimes no coherence between the policy initiatives that have been fostered by the EU Parliament or Commission and the implementation of that in political domain or in projects. So I would urge the EU to set up coordination mechanisms around freedom of expression and organize a continuous, intelligent debate about it that is strategic and not haphazard. And when I say strategic, I mean that it is not enough to say human rights in Iran are violated and DEFCO has money and you can apply. It just doesn't add up. And that, unfortunately, is the reality in many countries where Iran actually is a rather well-served community. So that's my second point. I think we need to invest in the mechanisms of anti-censorship. We personally are involved in investigating the possibility of European capability for situational awareness. That is deprioritized at the moment by the new incoming people. I think this is wrong. I think also we need to measure, and I'm encouraging Marietje to talk about it. How does she measure progress on the things that are very dear to her in terms of spending on the digital agenda and leveraging tools, etc. How is that happening? Is that transparent? Are we making progress or not? It's not very clear to me. And I'm half insider, I would say. So that's my second recommendation. The third recommendation, and I would like to stress the words that were said by Mr. Munian earlier, we need a multidimensional approach. I strongly oppose the idea of having this bipolar world of good people and bad people, and the EU is on the side of the good people. I think we need a multidimensional approach. We need more exchange programs for students. It needs to be continued, it needs to be invigorated. We need to talk to the people of the Middle East. We need to bring them here. We have to build bridges. And part of that would be my very important recommendation is we have not invested enough in the academic front, in the European side, in the academic front, on research into democracy and what works and doesn't work. And it's a shame. We should do better. And I think that, for example, if you look at credible institutions that have been created, like Citizen Lab, that has done tremendous work on the Iranian internet censorship front, we're missing that in the European context. Credible research institutes, more funding for it. And the fourth recommendation that I have is one of the new phenomenons which becomes minted as Project Titus, has also engulfed the European Union. What is Project Titus? We have a problem, we create projects. One of the problems that we do engage is that there's a new priority, let's say LGBT, and so we have a massive project for LGBT. And then other projects are neglected, they're losing core funding. And I think this was highlighted by some of our Iranian colleagues. The fight for democracy is a long-term fight. It is possible to say that a fragmented, let's say, diasporic media support landscape for Iran is maybe not the best way to serve it, but then choose 2 or 3 institutions that you really think make a difference and continue their core funding. Because at the moment, all organizations that are active in the democracy development arena lack consistency of funding. We have to go through hoops every time and again, shift priorities and this and that. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Willems.